Homosexuality has been one of the human experience's most shameful, conflicting, taboo, forsaken, and scandalous themes. Because of this, the baseline for homosexuality has been one of self-loathing. The link between self-loathing and homosexuality is so prominent that gays are faced with two journeys in this life instead of just one. Learning how to embrace our nature even when it's supposedly against nature itself, and sorting through the aspects of ourselves to discover which we fabricated to hide our true self from the world and which we actually identify with. Naturally, all of this would serve a very important purpose to the larger nature of reality. So today I'm going to be sharing what the higher dimensional role of homosexuality is, and at the end of this video, I will share why there are so many homosexuals in the world today and what program we need to overcome. Homosexuality is like the Mulholland Drive of the soul's journey. The confusion overpowers the arousal, but barely. It is never more accessible to live a lie than when we are faced with our own sexual orientation. It's just all too encompassing. So homosexuality puts a being at very high stakes choice points over and over again. It either forces us to retreat deep into a facade for our own protection, or it strips us of all pretense and warps us into the shadowland, confronting us with aspects of the whole collective psyche that shame has buried deep away, which eventually makes for really good art, but is pretty stressful. Gays are intentionally put between a rock and a hard place very early on. They are faced with themes that don't really have to be contemplated by the average person, such as, did we in fact choose this? If we did not, does that mean a higher power hates us? Are we victims of existence, or a punchline of an inside joke? They are forced into contemplation over concepts that would normally never occur to a heterosexual, like, what is gender? What does family really mean? Simple concepts that we all take for granted, as well as mental constructs, are challenged and drawn into question more from the self-discovery that our orientation provokes. All of this is done in isolation and blindfolded, since the world surrounding the homosexual does not mirror back to them any validation, let alone instructions for what's happening in their inner world, until they are old enough to run off to some major city and have at it. Which leads us to the higher dimensional role of homosexuality, which is to heal an existential and collective wound that to be, in whatever that means, is wrong. If shame and self-loathing are the dominant self-concept in the gay experience, it is because this is the exact experience that will set us up to become independent from outside validation and leave us with no choice but to either reject ourselves to varying degrees or begin releasing judgments against the self that are causing us to be conditional and telling us that we ourselves are wrong. Imagine that this is the microcosm version of something bigger than life that's playing out in the macrocosm. Imagine that parts of existence that are in denial of itself, let's call this force judgment, had convinced us that we are wrong for being. So judgment of this core wound of being wrong caused a drop in vibration, low enough to cause spiritual amnesia, aka the fall, where we have become disconnected from our totality and stuck within the lower dimensions of our entire being, since we can't speed up our vibration. Now, ideally, we would be able to come up and go as we wish, not get stuck in what is known as samsara. Well, what one would need to overcome is the initial feelings of wrongness and the judgments that came from the belief of being wrong for existing. And so one would need to have this play acting out in their microcosm world. And there are certain experiences that are better for forcing a person into healing the themes of being wrong, and homosexuality has been the perfect theme for this, because the individual is in a world designed to invalidate them. Since we are in a creating universe rather than a created one, we are conduits of energy that is in motion, the same way source is in motion, shifting and evolving, hence the Hermetic axiom, as above, so below. Through us, Source is healing judgments around it being everything. God is working through her shame of being feminine and masculine. Matter and spirit are harmonizing. These energies are meant to be reconciled within the individual as a part of our spiritual evolution. And what's being healed from this reconciliation is a bigger than life wound within creation. So homosexuality is the pocket of the collective psyche that is healing the repression of existential self-expression. If this were not the case, homosexuality would still exist, and its higher dimensional role would only be to learn self-love in the environment and in the reality of self-hate. This lesson is already embedded into the gay experience. But without this supernatural saga at play, our journey would be to only learn what it means to love the self deeper and fuller and at all costs, in a world where we are gaslit into believing we are wrong and should not be. This lesson is not exclusive to only coming out. It takes the form of remaining in the closet to protect oneself, because that is the reality gays have been faced with for centuries. So no one failed their soul's mission. They just learned different versions of what it means to love. Now, from a third dimensional perspective, nature operates one way. And from a higher dimensional perspective, nature operates a different way. And these two perspectives work in harmony, together, both simultaneously acting upon the nature of reality. For instance, the way nature operates here in the third dimension is most accurately translated through the lens of anthropology. In cultural anthropology, nature's number one concern is procreation. Only through procreation is the survival of our species ensured. Thus, above all else, reproduction is most important. We see this logic everywhere. In order to create life, there must be a male and a female counterpart. In fact, if I had to sum up all occult symbolism, it would be dwindled down to the obelisk and the oval, which represent the male electrical prong and the female reciprocal outlet. Nature is so focused upon baby making that it will introduce limitless genetic variations in order to ensure that any one of these variations will be adaptable to survive. And from the higher dimensional perspective, nature is far less single-minded and far more multifaceted, meaning that it's not only concerned with procreating, it's not even concerned with survival, since the soul is eternal. It's concerned with spiritual sovereignty and self-discovery, because through the exploration of oneself, the soul learns more about creation. In this way, nature takes on a completely different objective. So homosexuality is not against nature, since nature itself is multidimensional. What it's against are all the institutions that are trying to gain power through numbers, since an institution such as religion can't stay in power if they are not making babies and then indoctrinating them into our belief systems. Which is why homosexuality, wearing wool fabric, and eating shellfish all ended up an abomination. Because everything that led to either anaphylactic shock or the lack of reproduction was not fit enough for an institution to maintain control through numbers. To further enhance our understanding, have you ever seen those massive fights that break out online whether homosexuality occurs in animals or not? It absolutely does not matter at all because we are not animals. We are a whole density above animals. What this means is that animals have less input to factor into their being. They are wired through their biology alone, the instinctual drive to procreate. Thus, they are more bound to the third dimensional function of nature, with the occasional gay penguins thrown into the mix so that humans can go fight about God online. Humans have way more free will and complexity to their being, since they are third density beings and not second density. If you'd like to know more about the densities and how they differ from dimensions, let me know in the comments, and I'll make a video explaining what densities are, if that interests you. Because humans are third density beings, our curriculum is entirely different from animals' curriculum. Comparing the two is straight up insane. We have the ability to reason, to self-reflect, and we have the capacity for higher order thinking, among too many other core differences to cover. There are 2 reasons there are more homosexuals now than ever before. This is literally the first time in history where it's safe to be gay. And it's still not safe in many places. So more people are coming out of the closet because this is the first time they won't die for liking the same sex. The second reason there's more homosexuality, or even an openness in sexuality in general, is because we are chest deep in an evolution of consciousness. And when we're evolving, we're actually discovering that we contain more energies within us than what we have currently identified with. It's like one day becoming aware that you have more rooms inside your house. The house being our concept of self. Just to be clear, evolving doesn't make heterosexuals gay, and it doesn't make homosexuals straight. It just makes us more aware of the multidimensional energies we all contain. And gays are generally more comfortable with this concept because we started off introduced to sexuality through a heterosexual paradigm. So it's easier for us to accept that we contain a room within our being or within our house that has a lot of heterosexual activity going on. It's a very straight room, and we can freak out or just accept that this room is not exactly our cup of tea, but that it's a part of our galactic portfolio, and we don't need to do anything about it or even act on it. Likewise, some evolving humans are discovering that we have a lot more rooms in our house that contain more expressions of our being. And this isn't specific to sexuality, but it does include sexuality. However, the complexity doesn't even stop there. There are always 2 forms of expression that consciousness can take on: an organic form and a synthetic or engineered form. To understand this concept, you can watch my video, Developing Multidimensional Awareness, where I go into this in depth. Because there is an organic evolution of consciousness happening, there's also, at the very same time, a synthetic version taking place. A version that wants to pervert sexual expression and even to reject gender itself. So it's very important that we are able to discern the difference between these 2 energies moving forward, because the shadow side of the age of Aquarius that we will be dealing with from here on out is gender and technology. So the main challenge that homosexuals need to overcome in this era is seeing how our community is being intentionally manipulated to sign off on synthetic agendas that are trying to pass themselves off as being organic or even progressive. Because we are being used as a human shield to push artificial intelligence agendas, and they're doing it through exploiting our need to be accepted by a political paradigm. I hope this has elevated your perception of homosexuality. Make sure to subscribe to my channel for higher dimensional guidance through spiritual awakenings. See you next time.